Simon Sinek, a political activist in today's generation, once stated that today's politics isn't about the next election, it's about the next generation. This concept is kind of hard to idealize, to think of, to conceptualize, because especially in today's society, it kind of seems as though politics isn't targeting either one. That politicians isn't necessarily are focusing more on the election rather than the next generation. And today, the next generation is facing low voter turnout, which is a struggle in today's society to achieve democracy. Now, when it comes to low voter turnout, not only in this generation, but in all generations that are existing, it can create devastating problems to our democracy. Now, political activists throughout the entire nation, political scientists, are arguing for the idea of a national primary day. National primaries, how all here has voted in a national primary? Now, that's a number that I don't necessarily like to see. Only about half of you raise your hands, which is far greater than the national average to millennials that are voting in a national primary, which is kind of hard to idealize, to conceptualize, like I stated earlier. Now, a national primary day is argued to be beneficial throughout the entire nation rather than a sequential system for a primary day. As today, the primary system is voted over the course of 6 months, we should make it so it's only targeting one day. Now, this is for many reasons. We need to dive into the problems as to why a sequential system for a primary is very harmful for our democracy. The first reason is it creates low voter turnout. Now, Tom Daschle, former U.S. Senate Majority Leader, argued in an article from Time magazine in 2016 and stated the facts as to why this sequential system is not doing so well. In 2012, only 15.9% of all voters voted in the primary system. And in 2014, it was much worse than that. Now, that seems that as though many of you may argue that, well, it's the choice of us to vote in the election. So therefore, 15.9% doesn't matter. Even if it's 1%, it doesn't matter. But in an article from Caroline Tolbert, she argues, Michael Crawford Irvin at the University of Iowa argues in an article from the New Post in 2015 that the reason why low voter turnout is so harmful to our democracy is because in a democracy, we need to be aware that at least 50% plus one of voters are voting for a majority of legislation. And that is what's needed to require a majority, as that's what democracy is. But when less than 50% of people are voting in an election, it's less clear that the policies that are being enacted by Congress or by our government actually have majority support. That's why it's so critical, and that is why it's so harmful. Now, the reason as to why low voter turnout is happening, especially within the sequential system today, is because the primary system isn't as hyped up as it needs to be. Many people are actually unaware when their state is voting in the primary system. That is because of one main reason. It becomes less important as more states continue to vote. Many may know that New Hampshire and Iowa are the first two states to vote in the primary election, and that's what creates the hype. That's what causes all the presidential candidates, possible presidential candidates, to drop out of the race later on. But by the time California rolls around in late June, a lot of times the presidential candidates for both Republicans and Democrats have already been chosen. So we are indirectly saying that the California voters don't necessarily matter when choosing our presidential candidates, which is very critical in our presidential system, in our democracy, and the way we choose our president. And especially when it comes to low voter turnout, a lot of people are not necessarily aware of when those states are individually voting, which creates another problem, which therefore creates the low voter turnout. These are very critical problems for our democracy. The next issue, we are focusing a lot on the problems and as to why the problem is actually occurring, but I will actually offer a solution, unlike many politicians today. Now, the solution is the national primary system, as I mentioned earlier. A day where all the states vote on one single day rather than sequentially over the span of 6 months, which seems just unnecessary. Why don't we do it on an election day, like we do the election, like a presidential system? Caroline Tolbert, professor at Iowa University, stated in an article in 2015, that a national primary day would do more than any other reform possible to increase and bolster the average voter in our society. This is what we need to do in order to ensure that more people are voting, and to ensure that states have as much say, later states that are voting in a sequential system have as much say as earlier states voting in a sequential system. That is what is necessary, where all 50 states matter, and the people within all 50 states, rather than just a handful of them. Now, the reason why we need to look towards democracy and to benefit us and to move towards a national primary day is because it benefits every single person sitting in a room, and not just the half of you that raised your hands in the beginning. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you to call your legislators, because I know you guys aren't probably going to do that. I'm very aware that none of you will. But I can say is that in a later date, whenever the time rolls around for you guys to have the opportunity to have a say in whether or not we switch to a national primary system versus this sequential system that is hurting our democracy and causing a decrease in voter turnout, you guys will start a conversation with someone that may be unaware of what a national primary day could be. From the problem, low voter turnout, to the cause being we're very much unaware, to the solution being a national primary day. I hope you guys can have the discussion. As Leopoldo Lopez, a famous politician in Venezuela, says that a national primary day would increase the average, would bolster the average voter in everyday society.